Did you know that at least 17,833 people worldwide as of 2010 are sentenced to death? My name is Rachael Luttrell, and my speech topic is about the death penalty, and I want to tell you why I believe it should not be used. To get this across, I'm going to use statistics, the cost by state, which I'm going to focus on Kansas, how the victim's family is affected, and DNA testing. Some statistics about the death penalty are that 32 out of 50 states allow the death penalty. 46 sentences were handed down in 2010, which is the least since being reinstated in 1976. New Hampshire and Washington allow hanging as a form of the death penalty, but New Hampshire will only allow it if, for some reason, lethal injection cannot be used. There's a closure myth, which explains that once the death penalty is used, the victim's family will have closure. This is a myth because when the death penalty is used, it's a very lengthy process because they have to make sure that they have the right person before they kill them. For example, Jim O'Brien's daughter, DJ, was murdered, and he noticed that the death penalty process is too long and it's often appealed and reversed for a different sentence instead, for a lighter sentence. The death penalty hangs over his family's head instead of bringing immediate relief like they thought it would. Instead of funding homicide victim services to help the survivors heal, money is instead used in a court process. Hours are spent getting a few convictions and sentences instead of helping families of unsolved murders as well. For example, Gail LeSueur's daughter, Monique, was murdered, and her killer was never found. Families like hers have a campaign to end the death penalty and instead use the resources from that to help find murderers instead. Besides that, the death penalty is saved for more gruesome murders, which can make some families feel like their son or daughter's murder wasn't good enough to be avenged. And some families can even become divided, even though they're grieving, because they don't agree over whether or not the death penalty is the right kind of punishment to use. It's even more difficult when the victim and the murderer were related. For example, if a child's mother was murdered by their father, and then their father has a death sentence hanging over them, the child is now going to lose their mother and father, when they could just lose one. If we make the system faster, it'll make victims' families feel better, but the process is long for a reason. We have to make sure the person is guilty, or we're going to take an innocent life, and that just makes the tragedy even worse. The state that I've decided to focus on to show some statistics about the cost of the death penalty, I chose Kansas to focus on. In Kansas, when you defend a case where the death penalty is sought, it costs an average of 4 times more than a case where the penalty is not sought. Defense costs average $395,000 as opposed to about $98,000. Trial courts average $72,000 as opposed to just $21,000. Jury trials last an average of 40 days as opposed to just 16 days. Justices of the Kansas Supreme Court estimate 20 times more hours on death penalty appeals are spent than on non-death penalty appeals. And the Department of Corrections says housing costs are $49,000 as opposed to $24,000 a year. This just goes to show that having to go through the process of choosing the right jury, jumping through all the hoops to make sure that it's the right person, and doing all the paperwork to sentence someone to death costs a lot more time and a lot more money to the state when they could instead commute it to a sentence of life in prison and save a lot of money on the state. My last source talks about how convicts have been found innocent using DNA testing even after sitting on death row for years. If we impose everyone we thought was guilty with the death penalty, statistically, we're going to kill at least one innocent person, and this shouldn't be a chance we're willing to take. You can't be exonerated after already going through the death sentence, which DNA testing has cleared people before that we've already put to death. We don't want that to happen anymore. There's organizations that double check someone's innocence, which is good because once we send someone to death, we usually just forget about them. So it's good that these places are around. 18 people have been proven innocent. They've been sitting on death row in 11 different states for 202 combined years between those 18 people. An example of this situation is Kirk Bloodsworth. He served 8 years on death row in Maryland for a rape that DNA testing proved he did not commit. Another example is Robert Miller. He served 9 years in Oklahoma for a crime he did not commit. Damon Thibodeau served 15 years in a Louisiana prison. He was freed in 2012, and he had the threat of the death penalty put against him. So he admitted to a crime he didn't do, and yet he was given the death penalty anyway. So, in conclusion, the death penalty is something that hangs over the victim's family's head and doesn't provide them the relief that they thought it would. Instead, we could reroute the money to victim services and help find more murderers and give families the relief that they really want. We could make sure we're not convicting innocent people that maybe we could miss using DNA testing that could get sentenced to death that didn't do what we accused them of doing. We could save the state a lot of money and time, and we could save lives. Thank you for listening to my speech, and I hope that you will at least consider a change of your opinion after listening to some things that I had to say, even though I stumbled over a lot of them. Thank you for listening.